So let's now use one term for convenience, Satchitanand, just for lack of for economy of expenditure of energy. Let's just use the word consciousness.
Absolutely.
And so consciousness is the basis of every experience we have, whether it's mind or body or the universe, right?
Right.
So give your definition of consciousness and how you would explain.
You've got only the easiest questions for me. Give your definition of consciousness. In fact, it is interesting that we live in interesting times. So I was just talking to Deepak a little while ago. Consciousness studies has become very important in the last 20-25 years. Scientists were not so interested in consciousness until about 25 or 30 years ago. But right now, consciousness studies is booming. There are psychologists are obviously interested in it. Neuroscientists are interested in it. Linguists and philosophers and people, cosmologists are interested in it. Computer scientists are interested in it. So you think that all of these people are interested, so they know what they're talking about. Well, they cannot agree on what they're talking about. What is the definition of consciousness? There is no consensus. There are multiple definitions of consciousness, but none of them are acceptable across the board. In fact, a friend of mine who's a mathematician and a monk, he told me that I don't take this entire field of consciousness studies too seriously. I said, why ever not? Because it seems to be what we are doing as monks. He said, any field of study where you cannot define the subject of study is not yet a mature field of study. All right, now what Deepak is asking me is, give me a definition of consciousness. So I'm going to give you a definition of consciousness from the Vedanta perspective, where actually they are very clear on what they mean by consciousness. Get this. Whatever you are aware of is not consciousness. It's what is called a via negativa definition, a definition by exclusion. That means anything that you're aware of. Right now you are aware of sights and sounds and smells, all of this. So they are objects of consciousness. You are aware of them, and that which is aware of them is consciousness.
So then consciousness is basically awareness of experience, right?
Is the awareness in which experience becomes possible. Yeah.
So here, I attend these conferences that you're talking about, and people come up with all kinds of definitions. So some materialists say consciousness is first-person experience. Others say consciousness is the knowing element in every experience. But I think the non-dualists these days, a lot of non-dualists in the West too, they're saying that consciousness is the knowing element in every experience. So right now you know that you're having this experience. You also know that you have a body. You also know that you have a mind. So what is it that knows this experience called mind, body, world? Other non-dualists have expanded on that and said consciousness is that in which all experience occurs, all experience is known, and out of which all experience is made. So you started off by saying consciousness is not anything that is an object.
Yes.
So what is this? This is an experience in consciousness, right?
Right. Look at the words which Deepak just used right now. The knowing element, that by which knowledge is possible. Now what Vedanta would say is that if you carefully look at knowledge, all your experience, and eliminate mentally in your understanding, eliminate from your experience whatever is objective. By which I mean, you're looking at this beaker, this jar here. This is objective because it's an object of you're looking at it, it's an object. But what is looking at it? Your eyes. But you're aware of your eyes. Your eyes are open, closed, the guy is boring me so much I can't keep my eyes open. You are aware of that. So the eyes are also objects in your awareness. Now, you are aware of your eyes with your mind. You're thinking about your eyes. So the thoughts in the mind, you're also aware of that. So even the thoughts in the mind are objects of awareness. In this way, if you eliminate, again in understanding, everything that is objective, everything that is an object in your experience, you are left with consciousness as it is. And don't try to catch it. Now I will get consciousness as it is. You will never get it that way, because that would be an object. So it is the you, the real you. In fact, one definition of consciousness offered by one of the disciples of the great Shankaracharya, in Sanskrit, Anudam Chaitanyam. Very elegant definition. What is it? Not this awareness. From your awareness, from your experience just now, if you eliminate in your understanding everything that you can call this jar, this body, this eye, this mind, this thought, if you eliminate that which shines upon all of them, that is consciousness.
And what shines is the knowing element. So as Swamiji said, you can't go looking for consciousness because it is that which is doing the looking, right? You can't find it out there because it's that which is looking at what's out there. But let's go a little deeper now that you have created the basis now that consciousness is not an object. The object is experience in consciousness. Now this is also an object, right? This body is also an object. And the thoughts are also an object.
Right.
So can we say, let's say you're a baby, you just showed up in the world, which by the way has already been interpreted for every baby for 2000 plus years, ever since people started to speak in language and created culture and started telling stories. People started interpreting experience, and we are born into an interpreted world before we are born. You see, you're a baby. What you see here is not a shoe. You see a color, a shape.
Right.
If you touch it, it's a sensation. If you can smell it, taste it if you want, but or make noise out of it.
Yeah.
So these are sensory experiences, right? Without labels.
Right.
But then humans create labels and create constructs. We call that a shoe, we call this a hand, we call this a body, we call this the world.
Right.
And then we give names, and you were earlier on explaining to me, this is the whole phenomenon that we call Nam Rupa.
Right.
But this naming creates a human construct of what is really a sensory perception, which in turn is a mental activity, which in turn, as you just said,
is in consciousness.
An activity in consciousness.
Right.
So if we take that literally,
Yeah.
then this is also made out of consciousness.
This is, I think, Deepak's favorite theme, that everything is made out of consciousness. But here's the thing here, because that's what one of the schools of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, these Upanishads I was speaking about. So great philosophers came along and they took these Upanishads and they developed very complex but very coherent and consistent systems of philosophy based on these Upanishads. So they became the different schools of Vedanta. One school which is very well known is Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. There, the idea is that not only are you consciousness, but then everything else is also consciousness. Now this might sound, as somebody told me recently, a materialist. It's a wacky idea. It's a crazy idea. How can everything be consciousness? But it goes like this. Once you say that whatever is objective is not consciousness, that which is aware of the objects is consciousness, then you are left with the entire world of objects. The entire universe out there, my own body, even the mind, they're all objects. Now I am the consciousness witnessing all of this. Now your question is, then what are these objects? And that's where Vedanta becomes very interesting. It says, all of the things that you experience in consciousness as objects are actually nothing other than consciousness itself. You, the pure consciousness, the entirely subjective consciousness, appears out there as a world set in space and time and full of objects, with the help of name and form. So this names and forms, another name for this is Maya, name and form, Nama Rupa. So what you're seeing here is you, the consciousness, in yourself appears a mind, a body with its senses, and the senses reveal to it a universe of objects set out there apparently in time and space, including this glass jar. And all of this is name and form. Interpretation, as you said. Somebody put it very beautifully. Language is the knife with which you cut reality. So this patch of color, what it might look like to a baby, but the mother comes and explains, this is a jar of water.
And this is your body.
This is your body.
This is a hand, this is the word.
Yeah, and a concept of your body. Yeah, that also slowly a baby learns over time. That is my body.
So given this understanding and given the Vedic worldview and given the fact that we as humans we can only speak in language and explain things in language, and as soon as we create a word, we in a sense create a construct out of fundamental reality, which right now you said is consciousness, tattvamasi, that's aham brahmasmi tattvamasi. Given this construct, for our audience who's not familiar with these terms, can you help explain the difference between Jiva, Atman, Brahman, and then let's go further after that.
Oh,
This is an opportunity to get Vedanta in less than an hour. Okay, so we can't waste time. Let's get it all out here.
Oh, Vedanta 101 then. Yes. That absolute reality which Vedanta speaks about is called Brahman. And the word Brahman, etymologically, if you look at it in Sanskrit, it simply means the vast. That which has no limit. Just the vast. It's not a name of a particular god or anything like that. It's just the limitless, the vast.
Infinite.
The infinite. And by the way, when you talk about infinite, a mathematician or a scientist might want to ask you, what exactly do you mean by infinite? Because there are precisely defined infinites, more than one infinite in mathematics, for example. Vedanta has a very precise definition of the infinite. It says, that which is not limited in space, time, and object is the infinite. In Sanskrit, desha kala vastu paricheda shunyam. Devoid of limitations in time, space, and object. What are limitations in time? Born at this time, dying at this time, created and destroyed. So that's a limitation in time. If you do not have a limitation in time, what happens? You're eternal. There's no point where that is created, no point where it is destroyed.
So here's a very important thing to understand. Eternal doesn't mean stretching in time forever. Eternal means timeless, not in time.
You're right. It's not with something which lasts a long time. That's one way of understanding eternal, but that's just a preliminary step. The real thing is time is in you. You might ask, that sounds confusing. What do you mean time is in you? Vedanta means it in a very simple sense. When you experience time, right? That Tim just told us we're going to wrap up by 8:30. So it's in Tim's consciousness all the time that we're going to wrap up at 8:30. 8:30 is not aware of Tim. Tim is aware of 8:30. That's all that Vedanta means when it says that time is in consciousness and not consciousness in time.
Another human construct.
And no limitation in object. That's an interesting thing in Indian philosophy. Limitation in object means this glass jar is just a glass jar. It's not the table. It's not Deepak or me. So each object has its own identity and it's different from everything else. That's called limitation by object. And being infinite means it is not limited to any particular object, which means no object in the universe is different from Brahman. If no object is different from Brahman, there's no difference between Brahman and any other object. There is no second thing apart from Brahman, so that no second means Advaita, non-duality. So Brahman is that non-dual reality which is not limited by time, space, or object.